Emmanuel Griggs, the Office of External Affairs, and I work for the Clean Rivers Project doing community outreach. So I look forward to working with you more in the future as we continue the geotechnical explorations leading up to the tunnel construction in 2016. I know, Chairman Popper, that you responded to the traffic advisory and requested our presence here to talk about the work and the impact to the community. So we're here to request and look forward to running through, again, kind of an overview of the Northeast Boundary Tunnel Project, why we're doing it, what we're doing now, and our plans for the future. And we'll take any questions. We'll leave behind copies of the presentation. We will also be posting this on the dcwater.com Northeast Boundary Tunnel website. In addition, we have an environmental assessment project that is or an environmental assessment that began February 16th, which is a public comment period. Inference can be talking about this a little bit more, but it's a procedure that is part of the project where we post our design plans, impacts to the community, and then we give the public a chance to comment on it, make us aware of any particular concerns, so we can make sure that we adopt mitigation strategies to address those concerns. And we are at the tail end of the environmental assessment, which actually closes tomorrow night at midnight. We brought with us a stack of comment forms that are back on the table here. You can handwrite them. You can mail them in as long as they're postmarked by tomorrow. You can go online to the DC Water website and place your comment there electronically, or you can fax the form or email dccleanrivers@dcwater.com, and we will take your comments into consideration. But just because the comment period closes does not mean that we will not continue to work with the community and make sure your concerns are addressed. Back to Andrew.
So a little bit of background about the project itself. This project is the long-term control plan to protect this neighborhood and other neighborhoods in the Northeast Boundary area from flooding. We're on a consent decree by EPA to reduce the number of combined sewer overflows going into the Anacostia River and the Potomac River. So what the program we're undertaking is to construct a tunnel approximately 100 feet, 23 feet in diameter, below the ground surface to store the combined sewer when it rains and pump that water out and treat it instead of releasing it to the river, which is the current design. The segment of the project that is primarily will affect this neighborhood is the Northeast Boundary Project. On slide 4, we show some of the chronic flooding problems that have been occurring in and around this ward. In 2012, the mayor organized a task force to try to figure out ways we could address this flooding issue. From that task force, 3 primary projects were undertaken. The first one was green infrastructure and the Macmillan Storage Project up by Macmillan Reservoir. The second project was the First Street Tunnel, which is currently under construction. But to effectively solve the problem, the Northeast Boundary Tunnel is the solution.
Can we go back to slide 5 really quick? So this is pretty important. As Ainsworth mentioned, Northeast Boundary Tunnel has been part of DC Water's long-term control plan, part of the facility plan in 2007. We got these major storms in the summer of 2012, and it required a district-wide effort to plan a project to bring more immediate relief to the Northeast Boundary neighborhood drainage area, and specifically to Bloomingdale LaJoy Park, who were hit particularly hard. So what the mayor's task force came up with, there was members of DDOT, DC Water, and other district agencies on that task force, was a plan to, a three-step infrastructure plan that Ainsworth is describing. The first step was some immediate relief projects that DDOT completed last summer along Rhode Island Avenue, followed by the First Street Tunnel, which DC Water just let a contract for in October 2013, as well as another contract for using the existing McMillan sand filtration site as stormwater storage. So with those first two phases, Bloomingdale and Detroit Park neighborhoods will get essentially about 12 million gallons of storage by 2016. The final stage of the project to bring the entire northeast boundary drainage area, this neighborhood and neighboring neighborhoods, up to meet the district standard of the 15-year storm will be the northeast boundary tunnel that we're here talking about tonight. And the reason we talk about that in line with the mayor's task force is because the project was accelerated. Our consent decree required completion of March 2025. The mayor's task force project accelerated that to be complete by March 2022. So we're getting the storage and relief for flooding 3 years ahead of schedule than what we were previously. I just wanted to come here tonight and talk a little bit about that and what we've been doing in the neighborhood the last few months.
Are you saying then that this area is going to be under construction for 8 years?
No. So what's happening right now in Bloomingdale, there's a project that started in October. It will go through 2016. We probably will not start construction. We will not let a contract for this project until 2017. And then we'll come through. We're going to talk about the two construction staging areas that abut ANC 6E and discuss what we expect for the durations there. So they're more in line with the 2-year period for those specific projects. While the big tunnel comes through, that happens underground over a period of about 4 years, but a lot of that work happens underground. You wouldn't even know what's going on in the neighborhood. It's one of those big tunnel boring machines that you might have seen that they used to build WMATA, much more high-tech than what we had back in the 80s. Essentially soft ground tunnel boring machine.
And I'm assuming that the roads and everything, of course, will be under construction for all of this time? Are you then going to be working with people like companies that might want to put in underground wiring or anything else, so that once you complete and put down a new road, the next day we get somebody in front of us that says, oh, we want to tear up the road to put in fires?
Well, there's just two locations, and we're going to go through them in a little bit, of where we're actually tearing up the street to support the work we're doing underground. And we're going to go through those two locations here tonight that we've outlined in the environmental assessment. But yes, we will be working with the agencies to relocate utilities ahead of time, away from the structures. We'll go through it. They're very large structures that we're talking about. So Ainsworth, are you on slide 6? Just, I guess, walk through the three-step plan again.
So yeah, so the first step of the project was the McMillan storage facility that Justin spoke about. This project included some green infrastructure on Irving Street and the storage facility itself. The second phase is the First Street Tunnel, which is currently being mobilized and will be under construction until 2016. And the Northeast Boundary Tunnel being the third phase to the Neighborhood Protection Program. Now, the reason we're doing this is to meet the city standards for a 15-year storm event. Currently, the sewers only protect the neighborhood up to a 2-year storm event. By constructing this tunnel, we'll be able to meet the standard, the DC standard for CSO, for design and for stormwater protection.
So just staying on the slide, the graph is our best way to try and to show the project benefits. If you guys could look up here. So as Ainsworth mentioned, the approximate capacity of the existing sewer system in the district right now gets you at about a 2.5 year storm, meaning that storm has a probability of occurring every 2 years. And in 2012, we happened to get 4 of those storms within a few months, July and September. A 2-year storm has about a 50% chance of occurring any year. When we construct the Northeast Boundary Tunnel, the First Street Tunnel, and the other improvements, we'll be protecting the neighborhood to a 15-year storm, which is a pretty standard design, not just for DC, but other large cities in the country. The chance of having a storm event occur any given year is highly mitigated. It's between anywhere 4 to 7% on any given year. So we're reducing the probability of flooding with this project. And this flooding has been going on since the sewer system has been built by the federal government in the late 1800s. So this is a long-term chronic flooding problem that's been existing in the Northeast Boundary Drainage area since the late 1800s. The added benefit to the Northeast Boundary Tunnel is it will also store combined sewer overflows. Right now it rains a little bit, like it rained over the weekend. We have raw sewage that mixes with rainwater going directly to the river. When the Northeast Boundary Tunnel is complete, we'll have reduced combined sewer overflows to the Anacostia River from about 2.1 billion gallons when DC Water was formed in 1996 to about 54 million gallons a year, an overall reduction of about 98%. So those are the two benefits of the project as we discuss this and talk about the impacts here in the neighborhood.
So slide 9 shows the projected tunnel alignment and the chronic flooding areas in blue, where we have reports and observed areas where it chronically floods. Some of those locations are 3 under the Rhode Island Metro Station. Number 1 is right in this ward. It's by the Metro Station, up by Rhode Island Avenue and R Street. We have also other areas, Mount Albert Road in the Trinidad neighborhood, and the intersection of First Street and Rhode Island Avenue by T Street. So the plan here is, at these chronic flooding locations, we plan to put diversion structures to take this flow from the surface and drop it into the tunnel which we will be constructing. Now slide 9 shows the tunnel alignment, or proposed near surface construction in pink. And in blue we have this neighborhood. Now the only near surface construction area that will be in this neighborhood is the R Street site, which I'll go into a little bit later. But other construction along Rhode Island Avenue will affect this neighborhood in terms of traffic. Now, there was a traffic advisory that went out to the neighborhood on the 21st of March, which Beth was speaking about. This is not for the construction of the tunnel. That traffic advisory was for investigatory work that we're doing in conjunction with what we're proposing. Right now, we're doing things like surveying, geotechnical borings, traffic counts, all the necessary work that has to precede the construction of the tunnel. This type of work we're doing, it's in small work zones, and it's typically for short durations of time. We won't, right now we're in the environmental assessment phase of the project, so we're soliciting input from the community as to what the concerns are with how we're constructing it, what comments you have in terms of how it would affect the environment. We've tried to outline all the impacts as we see, and we've outlined that in the environmental assessment report. We will have some other investigatory work throughout the next few months. At the R Street site, we will have a boring and some data collection for traffic. And that's probably in the next 2 to 3 months.
So just so everybody's on the same page, when we say R Street site, it's the intersection of Rhode Island, R, and 6th Street, right there at Cooper Park.
We'll also have some investigatory work on Florida Avenue, at 3rd Street along Rhode Island Avenue, weather permitting. And we've listed the dates here and the tests that we will be conducting during those times.
Let me stop you for a second. Maybe you could provide a little more detail as to the amount of time that the boring and geotechnical and other investigations are going to be taking place at Cooper Park. And either now or later in your presentation, I think it'd be more specific about the short-term impacts in terms of closures of lanes of traffic, eventual actual impacts from the construction that will take place. You indicated 2 years from now, and then what your plans are for restoration of that park once your construction is completed.
Could we show what we're constructing at the park
Sure.
first, and then we'll get into the details about the restoration and also about the planned work there. But just for Cooper Park, we've completed the boring there. We will have to do a future boring closer to where we're siting our shaft, which you'll see in the next few slides. We haven't determined a date yet for that boring. That geotechnical boring will drill down with a small hole, approximately 100 feet, to see what the ground conditions look like. So when we complete our design, we can complete our design correctly to design for the ground conditions we expect to experience. At Florida and 3rd, we know it's close to ANC 6E, so we wanted to include that in here to let you know about the work going on throughout April at that location in case you see us out there as well. But let's talk about what we're doing at Cooper Park.
So as I alluded to before, we've separated the type of work that will be conducted under this project into 2 types: near surface work and deep structures. The near surface work is what will be shown at Cooper Park. It's a diversion structure that will be constructed on the existing sewer that will take flows from the existing sewer pipe and drop it down to the new tunnel, which would be 100 feet below the ground surface. If you look at slide 14, it shows our current plan for what we are proposing in Cooper Park. Now we're showing 2 alternatives here for what we're looking at. These were both included in the environmental assessment. We're proposing to put the diversion sewer, which is shown here in yellow, on the existing sewer, which is shown in green. We'll also be constructing a drop shaft at the intersection of Rhode Island Avenue and 6th Street, and a ventilation facility along Rhode Island Avenue.
So just so everybody understands what these structures do, as Ainsworth mentioned, the diversion, the shallow structure, in order to get flow from the existing sewer system to the tunnel, we have to build this box on the existing sewer. We want to put those boxes as close to existing chronic flood areas as we can, so we can control the flooding in that area. It happens to be we're on R Street, that's where existing sewer is, that's where we're putting the diversion chamber. We'll connect that to a shaft to drop the flow down to the tunnel level, and then at some locations we have what we call an adit, which is a fancy word for a deep tunnel that connects our shaft to the main tunnel. Here at Cooper Park, since it's the end of the line, it's the end of the northeast boundary tunnel, we will just have a shaft that sits on the tunnel. Flow will drop down that shaft, go to the tunnel, and be transferred 13 miles all the way down to Blue Plains for treatment before being discharged to the Potomac River. So the facility, you asked the question about restoration. We're currently, as you can see, the Cooper Park is right in this little triangle here. The shaft, just to give you guys sizes of the structures. Tunnel, as Ainsworth mentioned, is 23 feet in diameter. The shaft construction size is about 42 feet in diameter, about 80 feet deep. The diversion chamber is approximately 25 feet wide by about 50 feet long, about 30 feet deep to get down that existing sewer. And then the ventilation control facility is about 20 feet deep, a little more shallow along Rhode Island Avenue. So we do expect some pretty significant impacts to Cooper Park, and it's outlined in the environmental assessment during construction, but we're committed to providing a restoration plan that we work with Parks and Rec and the community. We actually have a meeting scheduled this week to meet with Parks and Rec with a conceptual planting plan of the park when we're complete. But we expect some follow-up meetings to further address how we restore that park.
Is anybody from the community going to be invited to
That,
these?
on Friday, it's just a planning meeting with Parks and Rec. We do eventually have a plan to come out and meet with the community and the other stakeholders in that park, so definitely, yes. Right now, we just want to get our bearings straight to make sure we're selecting the appropriate plants for the district, and then we'll come out and meet with the community and have, possibly do a little workshop or something like that with the community to help design the restoration plans for the park.
And just to follow up on the borings, the future borings, one of the reasons why we have to go back is in the EA, we have all different alternatives. As we hone in on the one that we want after we go through the EA process, we have to confirm those soils at the specific location that we finally designed on. So a lot of the structures along the alignment, we have to go back and then nail down the soil conditions exactly where we're doing the borings. So we're finishing up the EA process now, get the results back, so we can hone in on the boring that we have to do, and then we perform it. So that's why we have to have this second time going out there to do a boring.
Are you all paying for the restoration of the park?
Yes, DC Water will design, it will be a contract requirement in DC Water's contract with our contractor to restore that park to what we put in the contract specifications. Those contract specifications will get input again from Parks and Rec, the community, our landscape architects.
Are you sending out, are you going to be putting out RFPs on it, or
So-
it's just a done deal, it's going to be DPR, because they're not the best?
So we'll put out an RFP. The way this job's completed, it's a little different than typical jobs in DC, but it's, and Joel, you can chime in if you want, it's what we call design build. It's a best value contract that DC Water is working on. This will be for large tunnels, this will be our fourth one. Essentially, we will put an RFQ out, request for qualifications, we'll shortlist 3 design build teams, and then we'll enter a collaboration period with those design build teams where we discuss the contract, we discuss contract requirements, get feedback from the design build teams on our design, and at the end we'll select the team with, there's a scoring method between its price and best technical approach. So all of that goes into the selection of these design build teams. It's a rather lengthy process. It's a good process that DC Water's recently implemented, and we had success not only on our other past tunneling jobs, but also on our First Street Tunnel job to get some real innovation in the project.
Is there a reason why you're going to DPR? Because they don't follow through, and they don't, I mean, there's so many things in this ANC that fall under DPR that never get done and don't, even if they're approved and funded, they don't
Sure.
get done.
Well, it'll be funded by us. It'll be included in our contract to restore that park. It won't go through DPR. DPR, we're just using them as a stepping stone as our first meeting as we're in this conceptual phase of design to get that input we need to move to the next step, and the other stakeholders like DGS, like the community groups that have vested interest in that park.
Throughout the collaboration process for these design build teams, this is a long process that extends 9 to 12 months. We'll be having public outreach throughout that whole process and then backfeeding the public's concerns into the design process. So we have a long time, we can hear everyone's concerns about it, and we can try to address what we can physically address, we will, and we'll put it into the contract. We have to get this all approved through the appropriate, through Parks and Rec and a whole bunch of other agencies to make sure that we're doing it right.
I think you need to do more than just come up with a list of plans that are approved by DPR.
That's my point exactly.
Yes, you need to take a look, you need to hire a landscape architecture firm to design this park.
We have,
You need, who's been hired for that?
it's Wetland Studies and Solutions. They put together a conceptual design to support this EA process, provided some renderings for us that we're taking out, meeting first. Again, the first step is to meet, and again, keep in mind, we're in the very, very early stages of this. So first step is just to make sure we're implementing what plants are going to do well in the district. And before we come out and meet with the community on this, we want to get some input from Parks and Rec.
So you need to make sure that there's a water source, no pun intended, on the site to allow whatever plantings are established there to be watered, because that's been a problem with that site. People have had to water using hoses from across our street, from their yards. You should be looking at public art as a component of the final restoration of this park. So just a couple things that I know that I'm gonna be looking for in your plans.
Would it be possible, I know Beth, it'd be great if we could get that in writing in our EI comment form. That'd be great stuff to take back to our design team, take to the public, and take to Parks and Rec.
The commission will be preparing correspondence to submit.
Thank you.
You might
Thank
want to
you.
consider playable art also, because there's lots of kids around, and there's not a lot of parks and places for them to be, and it can be a piece of beautiful art that kids can play on. I can send you the samples that I just gotten for Mount Vernon Triangle that are being discussed now, and just give you some ideas.
Great.
Will the construction affect water pressure or water flow to the residents around this area?
There will be temporary disruptions. We talk about not for the continuous duration of construction, but there might be a day where we have to come out and shut down a water main. And that might be down for 8 to 12 hours, but we try to keep service on a daily basis. Same goes for gas and sewer as well. We'd expect to have temporary disruptions, but not permanent long-term disruptions associated with that.
But during the temporary disruptions, could it be the late night, early morning hours instead of?
Yeah, and exactly, that's good, that's a good point, and yes, we can look at that, we just need to see what again, we're so early, we're not quite sure when this work will take place in that 2017 to 2022 range, but yeah, we can look at doing that to try and keep it off-peak.
And you will be notifying everybody who's going to be losing water service for 8, 10, 12 hours.
Sure, definitely.
Because I know I live in a high-rise, and our water has been turned off on occasion, and nobody knows.
Well, as part of the sewer water policy, we're supposed to give you minimum 48-hour notification before we shut off water service, and we're supposed to give you a prior 7-day notification if we're shutting off sewer service. So those are, any project that we follow is supposed to follow that policy. So this project will, if there's other work that's happening that you're not getting that kind of notification, certainly feel free to reach out to us, our outreach component, because we'll need to research that, and oftentimes we will have to crack down on contractors on various projects, because contractors are contractors, and sometimes they don't do what they're supposed to do. So it's our, Beth and myself, it's our job to police them and make sure that happens.
Which one of you is going to be fielding the complaints from everybody? And their water goes off.
We'll share them.
You're going to share.
So in the past, when there have been service disruptions of this type, there usually have been door hangers that have been placed advising every residential neighbor of the changes. What do you do when you've got an apartment building?
Well, for apartment buildings, multi-unit buildings, well, we do one of two things. The policy is that we provide it to the property management office, and in turn, the property management's responsibility to do whatever they do. Photocopy it. Oftentimes, they basically reformat the information into a format of a flyer that the residents are used to getting, and they circulate it themselves. At the end of the day, the policy is that it's the property management responsibility to make sure the individual residents get it. We've had projects, as you can imagine, where the property management wasn't on site. There may be a property over in Anacostia, but the property management is at the 14th and K Northwest. So we've actually gone in and still gone door to door inside the building, which is not the policy, but we do pretty much what we need to do on a case-by-case basis.
And anything that happens to pipes and or sewer issues within a building, because the water was turned off, you all are going to pay for all those repairs, right?
Well, if there's a situation that happens in a building, we do have emergency crews that come out. Certainly they'll remove whatever is in the basement of the building. That's happened on projects before where something has gone wrong, and an emergency crew has to come out right away, which they typically do. And there was our responsibility to pump all that water and everything out of there. If there's any other damages, of course, we have a risk management office, so if there's damage of that nature, you certainly could will you need to reach out to our risk management office to formally file a claim whereby we can go in and process that and so forth. But as far as removing things right away, we do have emergency crews that will come out and get that out right away.
While you're at Cooper Park, I guess right now there are a bunch of sandbags around certain grades. Will this actually solve the problem here, the threat of flooding, or?
Yes, it will, I don't like to use the word solve, it will greatly mitigate the probability of flooding in this neighborhood, yes.
Okay, I don't want to hold you up, but you guys keep on talking about a consent decree.
Yes.
Okay, so sometimes somebody sued somebody to do
Yes.
something, and then they agree to do what now? Can you briefly?
Sure. The consent decree that DC Water is under goes back to 1998. There were a few environmental agencies that sued DC Water due to the impacts of the combined sewers on the river water quality for Potomac and Anacostia. So around that same time, DC Water started what we call a long-term control plan to mitigate those combined sewer overflows from being discharged to the river. 2005, we agreed on a long-term control plan approach, which is a similar version of what we're showing today, the tunnel system, with the EPA, Department of Justice, the district, and DC Water. They all signed that consent decree requirement to get these tunnels in service. The first stretch, RFK South, by March 2018. The second stretch from RFK North to Northeast boundary that we're talking about tonight by 2025.
The consent decree is basically for pollution going into the river, right?
And the
It's not-
flooding, correct.
But it does include flooding
Yes.
here, so.
Because think about the environmental health benefits, or the environmental health impacts of sewage being, when we talk about flooding in this neighborhood, it's caused by undersized sewers. It's not river water coming back up here. It's the sewers can't carry the rainwater and the sewage. They back up and they flood the streets. So it's certainly an environmental issue to have sewage running down the streets like we've had in 2006, like we had in the 1950s, like we had in 2012. So it will solve that, protect up to that 15-year storm for this area.
So just one correction or clarification, the sandbags that Mr. Mann was referring to are surrounding metro tunnel vents along Rhode Island Avenue. And what I've heard